Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swizz, and I'm here to talk about the Essendon team Supercoach discussion for 2025 with my good friend from the Centre Bounce podcast and FanCast, where he has a real footy chat. Joe, how are you, mate?
It's a proper footy chat, Swizz. You know all about it because you're on there all the time as well, mate. Thanks for having me. Doing really well. Keen to talk about the Bombers for a little bit. I haven't spoken about them one iota this entire preseason because we normally are kings of the preseason and then the season starts and it all goes downhill very quickly after that. So I just thought, you know what, let's put it under wraps for now. More than happy to share my thoughts. Thanks for having me.
No problems, mate. As always, check us out on all our social media platforms, in particular YouTube, Spotify. Get in contact with me via X Supercoach Insider 100 or Swizz26. Joe, where do the good people find you, mate?
They can find me at the Centre Bounce YouTube channel. The Twitter or the X handle for that is Centre_Bounce. And my personal one is Chabby_Joe. Both Big J and myself are quite responsive on the platform. So check us out.
Yeah, been doing awesome stuff with the new kids on the block a couple of years ago, and now they are like leading the game. They put out a ton of Supercoach content, so we love the work that you guys do. All right, so the Bombers probably didn't have the season that they wanted last year. Did fade away late in the season, as they tend to do. So the Bombers are actually hoping, and the supporters are hoping that they can rectify that. First 5 games this year, they do have the bye round early in round 4 and then later on in round 16. So kicking off with the Gold Coast away, then have 3 games in Melbourne, Hawthorn, Adelaide and Port. That Adelaide game is at the MCG. And then they travel to Adelaide with Melbourne to play them at the Adelaide Oval. So a bit of a unique fixture there, but that is because of the gather round. So at least that fixture is coming off the bye. Some interesting double games. The easy one is against my boys, the Tigers. The Bombers aren't known for getting percentage boosters, but that is a real opportunity. But outside of that, it looks a bit more tougher, Joe. And, the Suns, Bulldogs and Carlton probably 3 teams that could be anything this year. So I'll be trying to at least split them. But it is kind of in their own hands for those sort of games. And then, unfortunately, the Swans and the Cats is double headers. What are your thoughts about that fixture, mate? Looks a bit tough.
Mate, why is it that Carlton and their brown paper bags can finish higher on the ladder than us? They get the Brownlow medalists to have the record-breaking season. They get all of their players off of suspension whenever they appeal. And now they also are getting a wonderful fixture. Where's our wonderful fixture? Why are we playing our bogey team, the Cats, twice? Come on, they're going to beat us both times. The Blues, our nemesis. The Dogs. You never know what Bevo team is going to show up on any given day. I was happy that we did beat them last year. And, fingers crossed that we can continue to play a good brand of football and not capitulate next year. That's our next step. And the Swans, look, I guess we can only hope that from history, any team that makes it to a grand final against destroyed tend to have a really crappy year after. So fingers crossed that that's the Swans this year and we can win both games. Very unlikely, I know, but hey, if you don't laugh, you cry.
That's exactly right, mate. The Blues, mate, the Kansas City of the AFL.
100%.
So, and what about expectations for the season? As a long life Bomber supporter, you've seen some good times, and unfortunately, for a long time now, you've seen some bad times. Where do you see the Bombers finishing this season?
Geez, the good times were very long ago now. Oh, really testing the memory. But look, my expectations for this year are really no expectations. If anything, it's really just a hope that the young talent can continue to develop together, that we can continue to, I suppose, take the next step in playing 4 quarters of football for a longer period of time rather than capitulate at the end of the season like we saw last year. I'm not expecting finals. I think we're going to finish, 12th, 13th this year. That's just the nature of the competition, how good it is. If you take out Goldstein, we're the youngest team in the comp. So really hoping that the young talent can continue to develop.
Second youngest.
Second? Yeah, now. Big whoop. You guys don't count as a team. You're just a team of draft picks.
No, but I know what you mean. I know what you mean. For 100%, mate. You are a young.
You know what I mean?
The baby Bombers are back, mate.
Yeah, man. Just the baby Bombers. We have some pizzazz in some of these younger players, like you're going to see from Sadal Hole, from Kako. They're going to have immediate impact on the field as soon as they get on. They provide a different dynamic that you haven't seen from the Bombers in a long time. So there's a lot of enthusiasm about the potential of the side, and I'm just really hoping that they can develop and maybe get 12 on the ladder. I think is probably where I can see us landing.
Yeah, I think it's in that bottom 10 and somewhere between ninth and 14th. I think there's two obvious bottom teams, and then if a couple teams pick up injuries, it's always such a close season. So yeah, anybody can get on a run, and we've seen that in the past. Obviously Hawthorn a couple of years ago. So it's not out of the question that the Bombers can play the teams at the right time, get a bit of momentum. As my wife always says, it always seems to be the key word. And if string some wins together, nothing's out of the question. But yeah, definitely, I think Rosa in there are just trying to get some more talent through the door and trying to build long term. So you've got to sort of maybe go 2 steps back to go 3 steps forward. And then I feel like that's the situation. And looking in that Bombers lineup, as you said, there is some talent coming through. There are some experienced players too to help that. So yeah, it'd be interesting to kind of see the makeup. But yeah, I've got McGrath, Mackay, Ridley, Redmond, Reed, and Martin. Probably the standouts there is hopefully the fitness of Zach Reed, the young centre half back. Hopefully the Bombers supporters can see him put a consistent season together. You've got also the same with Ridley, who's had his own injury problems over a number of years now. I've got Nick Martin at half back. There is some talk that he could move back up the ground on the wing. I've heard, even guys like Zach Merritt have been trialing a little bit of halfback just to get a better kick. Martin's very good at finding the ball, but yeah, his kicking can be at times interesting. Yeah, you've got then the centre line of Harry Jones, Durham, and Xavier Dersma. I think Harry Jones, that's kind of a real question mark. Could have put a number of names there. We saw Nick Cox start there last year. Harry Jones took that position. They've got a new guy. I'll let you say his name because you say it so beautifully.
Well, he's a fellow. He's one of my brethren, Sadal Hole. I'm probably the only person on YouTube who's saying his name that way.
Yes, I love it. So yes, Al Harley comes in. I think he, potentially could, rotate either through the wing or the half-back line. But I think if he's fit and firing round 0 for you guys, he'll be there. And then the half-forward line, Perkins, Caddy, and Guilfey. I didn't want the Bomber supporters coming in here and lynching me by putting Peter Wright, who's probably got less fans than more. Unfortunately, like he on his good day, he can be very good, but on other days, not so well. And that's because I haven't gone right. I've had to put the second ruckman in, so did a bit of a jig of the side. Then I've gone Gresham, Langford, and the new guy Kako. Players, supporters out there kind of think Waitman, Ginnivan, you're going to get a bit of everything in that forward line, but you need that spark. It's probably been missing for a while. You used to have Tipper, how exciting was he chasing down players, and now, you're going to have Kako, and he's a great mate of Caddy in there, so I think they'll really work well together. Draper in his contract year, Crows are coming hard, but so hopefully he has a big one and then signs on the dotted line. Caldwell and Merritt. And then Al-Hali, Parrish, Shield, and Nick Bryan, the second ruck. Most likely, Bryan could start in the ruck, and then Draper forward, and there'll be a bit of rotation. And then I've got Roberts as the sub. Joe, thoughts, mate?
Yeah, I love Archie Roberts. He came in last year, and there's a silver lining for Sadal Hole not making it into the side last year because of injury. It's the silver lining is that we got to see Roberts play that halfback role, and he's just class, a beautiful distributor of halfback. He's just not flustered whatsoever. And in that Gold Coast game where we lost, unfortunately, to the Gold Coast Suns after the siren, when we hit 1 goal, 9 behinds in that last quarter, that 1 goal came from Roberts because this kid has composure unlike many others in this Essendon side. So he is certainly playing round 0. I can see him play every single week, especially off of halfback. And I'd have him certainly ahead of Dylan Shield, who I think is just depth at this point in time. And I don't really want to see him taking even Pryor as an option. I'd rather see Pryor in the side over Shield at this point and let Shield sort of be depth in the VFL in the event of injury that we can give him a call up. I agree with you having the 2 ruck setup. Draper has been training more in the forward line and working on his goal kicking this preseason. Still not great with his decision making up the ground, and I'd much prefer having Nick Bryan be in the ruck. And because Draper's a physical guy, he's someone that you can leave in the forward line for a large period of time to cause some chaos, bring the ball to ground. We now have ground level support. So looking forward to seeing how that dynamic continues to play out. They are both in contract years. And to be honest, if I had to pick one, I'm picking Nick Bryan. So much optimism around this guy. He was the best ruck in the VFL last year, and he needs his opportunity. He's too good to be languishing in the seconds. Whereas Draper, I think this is as best as he's going to get. So if we can get something good from a move to Adelaide, if it's a good compo pick or a trade, allows us to continue adding to our youth. And maybe, you never know, might be able to package up something nice to get in a good player like a Harley Reid, perhaps, across through the door. And it's another type of midfielder that we don't have. So, it will whether or not we take it to the draft. We have been trading forward and adding more draft picks to this year. So really excited to see how the youth plays out. You're right. Zach Merritt has had some stints in the half-back line. Brad Scott continuing to stress the importance of being able to play a second role in your team. Nick Martin, I don't think will be playing a lot of wing this year. He has been training with the mids and he has bulked up a little bit. So he is looking to potentially be in the guts a bit more this season, which is something that is really exciting. All of our early games does mean that Zach Merritt is, I think, a very viable selection for Supercoach because he can be a ripper VC option. And we've been seeing ever since he's become captain, he's hitting the ground running with his scoring a lot earlier in the season. He started last year like a house on fire. So really optimistic about our stars. Fingers crossed Ridley stays on the field, Reed stays on the field, Parrish stays on the field. We do have some stars in our side that we need to stay healthy. So fingers crossed for that.
Yeah, 100%. Well, we'll tick off each one of these Supercoach targets that I've got on the list. So Nick Martin, as you've already covered, from a Supercoach perspective, was fantastic for us last year as a defender. Yeah, it probably got burnt early with that 63 against Hawthorn, but then he went an absolute tear, a couple of 130s there, a couple of 120s before the bye. Did, dropped off a little bit during the middle part of the season, but then, finished off really strong again. So can get the ball, does turn over, and by taking some of those risks that he does, and some of his kicking isn't great, has cost the Bombers some goals from a footy perspective, and that's probably why they're trying to work out where's the best spot for him, because he finds the ball easy. We saw him kick those 5 goals on debut against the Cats a couple of years ago, so he's a very handy player for the Bombers, and can fill a number of roles. So maybe it is a case where they want the better kick, the composure of the captain. Maybe back there you've got some options that you can play through the midfield. Obviously, with you've got your Caldwells, Durhams, Parishes, so maybe a Martin in there. And now, what does that mean from a Supercoach perspective? A defender. We want guys in 2 positions. It's either in the halfback flank or we want them playing inside midfield. So if he is playing inside midfield and then having stints at halfback, he might be the perfect Supercoach player to go around in our sides again. The only problem is he does have that bye in round 4, so we can potentially get a look at him. Hopefully, it doesn't price us out if he is playing in one of those roles, and then we can look at bringing him in as maybe one of our first upgrade targets. Thoughts on Nicky Martin, mate? Would you agree with that? Maybe somebody you could look at trading into and rather starting?
Yeah, and I love Nick Martin. He's got the green light to do whatever the heck he wants. So he just follows the ball really, and so I think you can't go wrong with him. I think he's going to be a very safe top 6 to 8 defender come end of the season, and with his increased mid time, he will, I think, get the mid DPP as well, which does make it a bit more tantalizing of a selection. If you'd prefer to wait for him to get that mid status, I think that's perfectly fine, especially because of the early buy and you're looking to trade him in maybe afterwards. I do think that's a perfectly viable strategy.
Yeah, for sure. The second guy is probably the player I get the most questions from for Essendon at 552K. It is Jordan Ridley. So scores last year, he put up a 162, 111, 112, a 129, 127, and a 102. But he also had an injury affected 33, and it was the 63 up against Geelong. This guy, when he's up and about, is one of the best defenders we can own. He's he finds the ball. Well, even the year before, but he there was some injury affected games. He had an 18, comes straight back with a 122, 130, 102, 108, misses with the bye, and then scores a 137, a 138, and then doesn't play for the rest of the year. So absolute tease, because we know at some point he just goes down. If he could string it all together, wow, like this guy could potentially be the best defender in Supercoach.
Yeah, no. You won't find an Essendon supporter who doesn't love Jordan Ridley almost as much as they love their own children or brother. Like he holds a special place in all of our hearts. And you're right, it's always a tragedy that it just never seems to get pieced together for him. Is for some reason, one way or another. Maybe it's a dog act Willie Rioli concussion off the ball, perhaps, that does that to him, or unfortunate, or someone bumps him in the wrong way. It's a little bit like Lockie Whitfield in a way. It's you're watching them and you're a bit nervous about what's going to happen next. So now Rids, he's special. He obviously has that role of halfback and being an intercept defender. That's not going to change. Hopefully with Reid can stay on the park. Could see some intercept marks coming his way. The thing with, again, the question mark is how much of a split do we get on the kick-ins between him and Red Dog, who does take quite a few of those. Exactly, the good old doggy celebration there. So there's a lot of chefs in the kitchen at the Essendon Bombers, and that's why for me it's always dicey for me to recommend an Essendon defender, someone especially like a Jordan Ridley who isn't a pig. He's not like Nick Dacos, who demands the ball all the time. He's happy to do his thing, take his intercept mark, and then give it off to someone else. So he's really dependent on taking those marks and obviously using the pill, because he's a beautiful disposal efficiency type of player. But he isn't a pig. And so where there are games where he's not finding the ball, he's not going to score very highly. So for me, I probably would not recommend starting a Jordan Ridley, especially with the early buy as well.
Yeah, 100% there, mate. Now, in regards to Salawali, 119K. We could have got him for 102 last year, but comes in, gets picked up in the mid-season, dominates a VFL game, and then I think that was against Carlton's VFL side.
Yep.
And, unfortunately then goes down injured, but just as hopes get crushed. But is there any reason why we shouldn't be starting this guy, even with the early buy? Should he be a lock in 100% of teams?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. This guy is a jet. He's in preseason, in every goal kicking exercise, he's kicking goals from everywhere as well. Great speed, great footy IQ, knows where to run. This guy, absolutely, he's almost a better version of the Saad that left us before. I know it's a big call, and maybe you could be Essendon copium, but he is so talented. He is an absolute lock in the side without a shadow of a doubt. He is playing. You can field this guy for sure.
Yeah, for sure, mate. And I think a lot of people, they're either going to have him at D6, D7, or let's say M8, M9 if they want that loophole position. But he really should be cancelling. He's effectively not a player in our team because everyone should be owning him. So whatever happens to him for in round one, the only thing that's probably stopping it, if for whatever reason he wasn't there coming after round 0 and round 1, but you'd expect him to be at least at very worst the sub. But I see him playing a lot of footy for the Bombers. And if he does play round 0 and goes off, it's I think the ownership should be a lock anyway. But it's it will be absolutely that. I kind of nearly want to go the other way and him just have a really quiet game in round 0.
Yes.
Just to for people to drop off because you need this kid.
100%. I love him. He'll play wing. He'll play halfback. Between the two of them, he'll alternate depending on who's on the field. No, he's a lock. Zach Merritt.
Yeah, Zach Merritt next on the list, mate. So just going, I nearly started him last year, but the problem is usually Zach Merritt starts slow, finishes strong. That's usually his thing, but not last year. But it's amazing. So you go through his seasons. So back in 2019, he had a 105 average. Since then, 2020, 115. 2021, 115. 2022, 112. 2023, that was 116. And then we go last year where we had the 115 average. Mr. Consistency. If you want to lock a guy in for 110 to 115 average, he's your man. It comes 621, obviously one of the more expensive players in the game, is the Bombers' heart and soul, leading the way. Doesn't probably have the massive VC games, but talk about those early fixtures. You could VC him, but I feel like he's the perfect guy. Usually it's the backup for the captaincy because Mike VC failed. I need a 120 odd from someone minimum. Oh yeah, Zachy Merritt, because we know he's going to do that. So I've got no problems with people wanting to go there. Obviously, again, it's that early buy which does affect. But so maybe it's an upgrade target, but it's obviously very expensive to get to him. Playing off halfback, does that really affect things? Probably not as much. Like if he goes down there for parts of the game, could you just imagine Zach Merritt racking up the ball up there too? But I still think he starts the first bounce in the midfield. It might be just one of those rotations throughout the game where he might just head down there, especially if they need a little bit more composure coming out of the halfback line if something's not working. So I'm sure that's why they've been trialing it. But yeah, I still expect him in the guts. Tag doesn't matter. Zachy Merritt, if you want to start him, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, it makes it exciting because how often do you see, Zach Merritt's tearing it up? Send the tagger to him, get him out of the game. What Brad Scott did was push him forward. If what we're going to do is push him behind the ball to have him play off half back instead, whenever there's a tag, it's just, as you said before, Swizz, the two best positions that we want from our non-ruck players are either in the centre bounce or off half back. And you're getting a guy like Zach Merritt with his glorious ball usage and his creativity and his ability to rack up the pill. It's really exciting. I can't see myself finishing my team this year without having Zach Merritt in my side. I won't be starting him because I really want to have a strong start and really trying to minimize the number of early buy premiums that I've got. But I think Zach Merritt for sure is going to be one of the players that is part of my finished midfield by the end of the season.
Yeah, for sure. And his mate there in the midfield at 481K this year. So it is a bit of a bargain basement for a guy who has put up some massive averages over a number of years as well. So he really had his breakout in 2021. And that was that Anzac Day game where he went 162 against the Pies, averaged 114 that year. Backed it up in 2022 with a 110. Well, it was actually a 111 because it was 110.9 something. So we'll give him 111.
Give it to him. Give it to him,
Swizz. Following year, then 108. And then obviously had some issues with injury last year, could only put up an 89. So this guy is probably 15 to 20 points undervalued. If you're picking him, but you were expecting him to be a keeper, it's not really a cash cow move. But if Parrish does look back and get his body where it needs to be, we know this is a guy who can easily average 105.
Oh, easily. He's a lock for our centre bounces. He's one of our best contested ball winners in the comp. He was rivaling Libba a couple of years back when it came to and Clary when it came to the clearances and the contested possessions in there. That is the caliber of player he is. It's just an absolute tragedy, unfortunately, that his body continues to let him down, especially those calves of his, the soft tissues, always strike. I was so bullish on him. I actually had him in my starting team last year before he unfortunately got his latest soft tissue injury. So for me, there is absolutely value there if he can stay fit. And for me, he's had a ripper preseason. He's been flying. He was doing some work with grappling, and he's really hard to tackle now as well. So now he's had a great preseason, but unfortunately, I've seen this movie too many times, and I'm not going to be spoiled again. I'm not going to put myself through that heartache, unfortunately. If you can stay fit and healthy for you, you don't trade in the risk. If you don't start him, don't you dare trade him in. You always start the injury-prone players. You don't trade them in, because in the event that they do get injured, you've burned a trade trading them in, and you're going to burn a trade trading them out again. So if you're going to go the risky route, definitely there's value there, but there is a lot of risk attached. I personally am not going that way, but if you do, I salute your cojones.
Yeah, my co-host Benny Boy is so big on miniguns parish. I don't think he's left his side so far. So it'd be interesting if that's still the case come the start of the year. If he does have a big game in round 0, that's where if he comes out in the preseason game and goes out and gets 30 touches and then backs it up in the round 0 match. I think his ownership will probably before that will probably be hovering under 5%. And it could skyrocket to, that sort of 15-20% range, because people will be looking at the price, looking at what he's done in the past, and be like, you know what, I'm jumping on this ride. So yeah, that's all on that round 0 game, and he could be the big boom or bust this season. So yeah, I love those sort of players, because if you get them at a discount price, you're so far ahead of the rest of the competition. But if they leave, don't perform, or they get injured, it kind of leaves you in a little bit of a no man's land.
Correct, especially if he pops off against, who is it, the Suns over there at People First Stadium. Like dewy conditions, the Suns aren't a slouchy team. They've got a good midfield themselves. So, if Darcy Parish puts on a clinic in dewy conditions against a good midfield, then at that price, absolutely, like you can totally see why people might jump onto him. And then he has a head-to-head matchup with Jai Newcomb the next week. So that will be an interesting one at the MCG to watch. So, yeah, it's interesting to see. We'll see how that plays out.
Yep, 100%. Now, what else can you tell us about the great man Isaac Kako coming in here, going to revolutionise the Bombers forward line? He's going to be at the bottom of packs. He's going to have a bit of a swagger about him. Is the inflated price 149 too much to pay for a small forward? And what are your thoughts about him?
Look, what you're paying for is absolutely job security is ironclad. He will be playing every game without a shadow of a doubt. And I do think, though, it is a bit too much to pay personally. There are other options that are significantly cheaper that I think will also be likely to play. But of course, time will tell if any of those rookies do play. So make sure that you have a way to have a starting team where you can have Kako in your forward line, because I think Dan Curtin is probably a popular one on a lot of people's benches. But then the other one sort of has a bit of a question mark. Some people have got like a Cleary, for example. But if these rookies don't get up to play and don't have the job security, then you may end up needing to play someone like a Kako. And at the end of the day, I don't think it's that big of a deal, because he does have the DPP and he does give us a different look. He's pretty happy to go up the ground a little bit. He's not just a stay-at-home forward. So he can find the pill higher up the ground. He's really evasive, so he won't really get a lot of high on the ball decisions against him either. And he's got terrific IQ, so he might even get some score assists in addition to his own goals. So look, I wouldn't have him in. I don't have him in my team currently, but I do have a look and see whether or not we have other rookies that are available. And if not, then I'm more than happy to end up picking him as a backup option.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good call. Anybody from my list that I haven't included that you'd like to discuss?
Think there is a question still. I don't think our back line is 100% set either. Shield might be fighting for his spot with Pryor. Pryor has actually surprised a few of the track watchers so far this preseason with his size. as well as his ability to really go for the overhead mark to intercept. Shield, in his time in the backline training, doesn't really have that. That's not part of his game. He's more on the ground, zipping, running off the half back line. Whereas in terms of defensive accountability, Pryor is better than him at that, having played that role over there at Brisbane. He's also a very neat kick. One passenger play that really comes to mind in one of the match sims that we've already had was he kicks the ball out, he takes the kick in, kicks the ball up to Nick Martin, but he follows up on the play and gets the handball received and kicks it back out again. Think of Kitty Coleman that you saw in the preseason. Everyone's like, crap, we need this guy in our team. That's the exact sort of play that Jackson Pryor pulled off in the latest match sim. So I'm keeping a close eye on Pryor. If he is named in the side ahead of someone potentially like a Laverty, for example, maybe even a Shield as well, because we can then push out, for example, an Alhaule out onto the wing. Maybe Jones doesn't end up playing, or he plays as a forward potentially. But I do think there might be a spot for Jackson Pryor in our backline.
Yep, no, good call. One player I'd sit there and say definitely no to this year is Jai Caldwell. Well done to those who jumped on him. Averaged 94 last season, played 23 games. But last year he was a forward. This year he is a pure midfielder. So at that starting price at 506, you can actually get players like Parrish cheaper. It's just not I don't see him coming out and having that growth where he, takes the next step to an Uber Premium. Going to be a fantastic player for the Bombers, but yeah, not for this game.
Yeah, he's still coming off of a hip surgery last year, so he's not in full training yet at the moment. Still just running laps around the outside of the perimeter. So he's obviously got the cap on and everything. So he hasn't really taken place. He looks quite fit though, in terms of a physical leanness. He does seem to have that fitness there. So the hip surgery, whilst he's not in full training, hasn't limited his ability to run, which is quite impressive, really, because I can't imagine running without my hip doing something ridiculous, but that just might be me and only me alone and not a professional footballer. But he seems to be on track for a full return in either late Jan or early Feb. So yeah, I wouldn't go with him. You really want to cement the people that have had full preseasons, and absolutely Darcy Parish. If you want to roll the dice with him, full preseason under his belt, a lot cheaper, and has got historical Uber Premium potential type scoring. Yeah, I'd certainly be rolling the dice with DP3.
Yep, 100% there, mate. The other one I was just going to say, even with Caldwell, I think because of what he did last year, even if you get in those draft leagues, there'll be a bit too much hype about him. So I'd be just trying to avoid him altogether, because I think the price is too much to pay. Where his counterpart, like sort of Durham, he's more likely to slide a bit further in drafts. It's just not as the sexier pick, but they both nearly mirrored each other. With their scoring last season. It was just, Durham played that one less game, but an average of 94 versus 90. I think you could get Durham at least 4 or 5 rounds after, say, a Caldwell type. And also, there's always been a lot of hype about Sardis. I'd be probably just leaving him alone in all competitions. I know the 191 looks tempting for a guy that, it could be this year, but I would rather get some evidence behind that, see it, and pay a bit more for it than taking the risk on it.
Oh, he's bulked up, Elijah. He's probably, of everyone on the list over this preseason, I think Lige probably has had the biggest transformation. He looks like a big-bodied mid who's ready to go. And the big thing about him that is so good to watch is the speed with which he attacks the stoppage, and the fact that he just doesn't fumble. He's so good with his hands, and he's a beautiful distributor by hand. Naturally, his kicking has always been the one that is most suspect, but so far this preseason, from track watches, he hasn't been fluffing the ball by foot as badly as the past. So his hard work off the training, he'd always stay back, always the last one to leave, working on his kicking all the time. And I think it's maybe starting to pay some dividends with his action, with his ball drop action. But yeah, Lige, he's one to really keep an eye on. He really might end up forcing his way into that midfield mix, and it could be really exciting for him. Keep an eye out on him, please, guys.
Yeah, I think the talent's there, but I'd want to see it. Like, I would rather him get to 250 and be like, yeah, he's pumped out 3 or 4 decent scores now, even
Yep.
slightly more,
Sure.
and go, okay, this is but instead of a guy that's, yeah, he's found himself out of that side more than he's been in it, for some of those reasons, as you've said. So, yeah, it's a no. And there's some good play, like we talked already about, like your Roberts. We already talked about Al Harley coming in, mate. Kako's going to come in. So, yeah, there'll be
Even Jaden
opportunities at some
Ewan.
point throughout the season. And we haven't even talked about, say, a Hobbs, for example, too. So there's a little bit of depth there with the young fellas. But, there's some senior guys who will be taking those spots first.
Yeah, for sure. That's where Brad rolls. You really have to earn your spot to get into the side, and I don't mind that at all. We need to have competition for spots, and if you deserve your spot in the side, then congratulations, you earn it. Sometimes Brad gives the older players, unfortunately, a bit too much benefit of the doubt, but I really hope this year we start to be a bit more ruthless and really giving the youngsters a genuine crack at it. I'm even surprised with Jaden Ewan. He's been one of the surprising highlights. 99 absolute basement price rookie defensive mid option, and he's been doing really well in the drills, utilizing his speed. He might also be one that ends up getting a gig. Might be a pretty decent downgrade option at some point as well in the future. So yeah, there's a few youngsters at the Bombers that you might end up downgrading to, but with Hobbs, I just can't see how he has a future at the club. I can't see him kicking anyone out of that midfield mix, unfortunately. He just doesn't have any speed to play an outside type game.
And that's why he ended up dropping, I think, to pick 13 in his year, even though he was rated in the top 5.
Yeah.
It's got that sort of, so I think maybe a bit Jackson Haitley sort of vibes in there. Like, yeah, plays inside mid, but yeah, you've got to have those extra strings to the bow. And if you don't have the explosion coming out of the pack, it makes it very hard to play at this level, and could turn out to be one of those guys who's just too good for VFL, not good enough for AFL.
Yeah. Speaking of strings, Nick Cox as well, still a string bean as well. This late in his career, so it's interesting spot for the club at the moment, but big list calls to be made at the end of this year, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that's all on the Essendon Bombers this year. Will be an interesting watch. Once again, Joe, where do the public out there find you, mate?
Mate, you can find me at the Centre Bounce YouTube channel. On X, you can reach out to centre_bounce, myself directly, Chabby_Joe, and at FanCast AFL as well, if you just want general footy content.
Love it, mate. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll be back for another team discussion soon. See you guys. Bye.
Bye.